The divorce papers touched the rail beside Claire's motionless hand before Adrian looked at her face. The ventilator answered for her. Hiss, pause, hiss, while green numbers pulsed across the monitor and fluorescent light glazed the room in sterile blue. Beneath the sharp scent of antiseptic lingered the faint lavender of the hand cream she once kept beside their bed. Adrian set a black fountain pen on the folder. Its polished barrel rolled toward her wrist, tapped the plastic rail, and stopped. Claire did not move. A feeding line disappeared beneath the white blanket. Her dark hair had been brushed away from her temples, though one loose strand clung to the moisture near her cheek. Adrian kept his charcoal overcoat buttoned. He had not sat down. The attorney said your representative can handle the rest, he said. His voice carried the clip precision he used in boardrooms, each word placed where no one could question it. There's no reason to make this harder. Only the machinery replied. He glanced at the door's narrow window. Beyond it, rubber soles squeaked across wax tile, a cart rattled past, and then the corridor became quiet again. Adrian pulled the top page from the folder. Their names sat together in severe black type. Adrian and Claire, joined one final time by the petition meant to separate them. His thumb covered the line that read irretrievable breakdown. Claire's left hand lay less than 6 inches away. The hand that had steadied his tie before investor meetings. The hand that had written reminders in the margins of his presentations. Now its fingers rested open against the sheet, pale beneath the hospital light. I waited, he said, softer, as if lowering his voice made the words merciful. I postponed meetings. I answered every call from this floor. I did what I could. His jaw tightened when the ventilator released another measured breath. He slid the petition closer to her, aligning its edge with the bedside table. But I can't bury my future in this room. The sentence landed between the electronic beeps and stayed there. Adrian's fingers remained on the folder for half a second, then withdrew. He looked at Claire as one might look at a locked house after leaving the key behind. Her eyelids stayed closed. Her lips remained parted around the breathing tube. Nothing in her body gave him permission, resistance, or absolution. He reached into his coat and placed his wedding ring beside the pen. Metal clicked against laminate, a small, clean sound. You won't know the difference, he whispered. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Adrian turned toward the door. Behind him, warm fluid gathered at the outer corner of Claire's right eye. It trembled beneath the hard blue light, then traced a slow path across her temple and vanished into her hair. Adrian's hand had just closed around the cold steel handle when the bedside monitor gave a sharper note. He stopped. In the dark reflection of the window, he saw the tear still shining on her skin, and for the first time, the silence no longer looked empty. A sharper electronic note cut through the low mechanical breathing, thin as a needle against the room's refrigerated hush. The door opened before Adrian could release its steel handle, and Dr. Elias Morgan stepped inside, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic and winter air on his white coat. His gaze moved from the altered waveform to the wet trail along Claire's temple. Then Adrian spoke. It was only a tear. Beneath the blanket, Claire's right index finger shifted. Less than half an inch. Dr. Morgan stopped. Say something else. Adrian looked at him as though the request were absurd. Blue light from the monitor sharpened the planes of his face. Behind him, the divorce petition waited beside his wedding ring. Claire, he said, his voice lower now. Her finger moved again. Not a spasm this time. A measured bend toward her palm. Dr. Morgan crossed the room and pressed 2 fingers lightly against her wrist. Claire, if you can hear me, move that finger once. The ventilator exhaled with a soft hydraulic sigh. 1 second passed. Then 2. Her finger lifted and settled against the sheet. Once. Adrian's hand slipped from the door handle. Reflex. No. Dr. Morgan drew a penlight from his pocket. Its white beam passed across Claire's pupils, and each contracted cleanly. He leaned in her narrow field of vision. Claire, look up for yes. Her eyes moved upward. Look down for no. They lowered. The silence changed shape. It was no longer absence. It was a trapped answer. Dr. Morgan pulled the privacy curtain halfway closed, muting the corridor's rolling carts and rubber-soled footsteps. "Can you feel me touching your hand?" Claire looked up. "Do you understand where you are?" Up again. "Do you know Adrian is in the room?" Her gaze rose once more, then held there. Adrian backed into the wall. The framed hospital notice pressed crookedly beneath his shoulder, but he did not seem to feel it. "What is this?" Dr. Morgan switched off the pen light. "Locked-in syndrome. Her mind is awake. Her hearing and comprehension are intact, but the injury has interrupted most voluntary movement. Her eyes and that finger are giving us a reliable channel. You told me she was unresponsive. Unresponsive is not unconscious." The words landed without volume. Adrian looked toward the bed. The ring beside the petition caught a strip of fluorescent light, bright and merciless. "How long has she been aware?" Dr. Morgan studied Claire's tracking eyes, then the tear drying against her skin. "Possibly since before you entered this room." Adrian's mouth opened. No sound came. His gaze traveled from the papers to Claire's face, as if measuring the distance between what he had believed and what she now knew. "Did she hear me?" The doctor did not answer for him. Instead, he moved to Claire's bedside and placed one hand where she could see it. "Claire, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you hear Adrian speaking about the divorce?" The ventilator filled her lungs. "Release them." Her eyes lifted. "Yes." Adrian's fingers curled against the wall. The expensive wool of his coat rasped beneath his nails. "Claire," her gaze shifted toward him, precise and fully present. There was no confusion in it. No mercy he could mistake for emptiness. Dr. Morgan picked up the divorce petition before Adrian could reach it. Paper whispered against paper. "From this moment forward, nothing concerning Claire will be discussed as though she isn't here." He set the file beyond Adrian's hand and pressed the call button. "I'm ordering a communication assessment tonight. Until she can express her own decisions, you will wait." A soft chime sounded at the nurse's station. Adrian remained pinned beneath Claire's unwavering stare, confronted not by a helpless wife, but by the only witness who had heard every word and could soon answer him. Cold fluorescent light slid across the sealed treatment file in Dr. Morgan's hand, whitening his knuckles and the red confidential stamp on its cover. Behind him, the ventilator continued its measured breath, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic through the chilled room. Adrian stepped away from the wall. "You can order whatever assessment you want," he said, smoothing one cuff as though the crease mattered. "But the marriage is over. Conscious or not, Claire cannot force me to remain married to her." Dr. Morgan did not answer. He placed the treatment file on the rolling table, opened it, and turned several pages beneath the examination lamp. Claire's eyes followed the movement. "No," Morgan said, "but before you make another decision in this room, you're going to understand why she was brought here." Adrian's jaw tightened. It was a highway accident. At 8:17 p.m., 6 weeks ago. Morgan rotated the file toward him. A clear evidence sleeve held Claire's cracked phone. A hospital inventory label stretched across its black screen. Beneath it lay a printed emergency report and a photograph of a silver flash drive recovered from her coat. She was traveling north on Interstate 95. According to the navigation history, she was 11 minutes from your company's headquarters. Adrian glanced at Claire, then back at the documents. That proves where she was going, not why. Morgan drew out a page marked with Claire's name and a chain of custody number. The paper made a dry, scraping sound against the plastic. Rows of test results filled the center. Dosage variances, sensor failures, patient risk projections. At the top sat the model number of the cardiac monitoring device Adrian's company had scheduled to release the next morning. "These files were on the drive," Morgan said. "Independent validation data showing that your device could misread irregular rhythms under specific conditions." Claire had also drafted an emergency suspension request. The room seemed to contract around the soft hiss of oxygen. Adrian took the page. The corner trembled between his fingers. "She never told me." Claire's gaze moved to him. One deliberate blink, then another. "Her email records show that she tried," Morgan said. 3 messages to your executive account. 2 calls to your private line. All unanswered. Memory arrived in fragments Adrian could not keep outside the room. Claire's name glowing on his phone during a board dinner, his thumb silencing it beneath the white tablecloth. Her final voicemail left unheard while champagne glasses rang around a pending launch. The release built this company, he said, but the words emerged thin. Morgan tapped the wrist projection with one finger. She was not driving there to celebrate it. She was carrying evidence that could stop it. Adrian's eyes dropped to the divorce petition beyond his reach, then to the wedding ring lying beside Claire's motionless hand. Minutes earlier, he had called this room a grave for his future. Now, the polished gold caught the clinical light beside proof that Claire had placed her own future between his company and a dangerous product. He reached for the petition. Dr. Morgan closed his palm over it first. The gesture was quiet, absolute. "You may still choose divorce," he said, "but you will not use her condition to make it easy." Adrian pulled his hand back as if the paper had burned him. On the bed, Claire's right index finger moved less than half an inch, dragging slowly across the cotton sheet toward the file. Morgan noticed. He moved the evidence within her line of sight. "Claire, is this what you were bringing to Adrian's company the night of the crash?" Her finger pressed once into the fabric. "Yes." The ventilator released another breath. Adrian stared at the woman he had described as an obstacle, and for the first time, the life he believed he had built looked borrowed. Dr. Morgan slid the divorce papers into the treatment file and locked both inside the bedside cabinet. "The communication team will be here in 1 hour," he said. "After that, Claire decides what happens to those papers and what she wants done with this evidence." The lock clicked. This time, Adrian was the one with no voice in the room. A soft electronic chime broke the room's mechanical rhythm as the communication screen rolled beside the bed. Its glass reflected pale afternoon light, while the ventilator sent cool, filtered air through tubing that smelled faintly of plastic and antiseptic. Dr. Elias Morgan lowered the screen until the alphabet grid filled Claire's field of vision. "The camera will follow your eyes," he said. "Hold your gaze on each letter. Blink twice to confirm." Adrian stood near the locked cabinet, his abandoned wedding ring still visible through its narrow glass panel. He took one step forward. Morgan raised a hand without looking at him. "No prompting." The first calibration took several minutes. A green cursor trembled wherever Claire looked, slipping between letters whenever exhaustion pulled at her focus. Sweat gathered along her hairline. The cuff around her arm tightened with a dry mechanical hiss, then released. Adrian watched her fight for every fraction of movement, his fingers curling around the back of a vinyl chair. At last, the cursor steadied. G, then IVE. The machine's artificial voice pronounced each letter with clinical patience. Claire paused, drawing a ventilator-assisted breath. M, E, T, H, E, P, A, P, E-R-S. "Give me the papers," the device said. Adrian's grip left a white indentation in the chair. "Claire, you don't have to decide today." Her gaze moved before he finished. "Annie." "Oh." The single word sounded louder than the monitor. Morgan unlocked the cabinet and removed the divorce petition, placing it on a rigid tray above Claire's blanket. The pages rustled beneath the air vent. Adrian reached toward them on instinct, but Claire fixed her eyes on him, then shifted them deliberately to Morgan. The doctor moved the file beyond Adrian's hand. "This is her decision." A hospital notary entered with an adaptive signature pad. Morgan explained each clause and asked Claire to confirm it individually. Yes, she understood the marriage would end. Yes, she was acting voluntarily. Yes, she wanted independent counsel to review the final filing. Her answers came through measured blinks, each one small enough to miss and final enough to alter 2 lives. For the signature, a nurse fitted a soft brace around Claire's right hand and guided a stylus between her fingers without directing its path. The black tip touched the glass. Claire summoned the same finger that had answered Morgan, dragging it through a broken, wavering version of her name. Corso L-A-I-R-E. The final stroke barely crossed the screen, but the device accepted it with a clean digital tone. Adrian stared at the signature beneath his own. He had brought the papers believing her helplessness would make the ending easy. Now her consent looked less like surrender than a door closing from the other side. Claire was not finished. Her eyes returned to the alphabet grid. M-O-V-A-A-D-R-E-I-N. The effort left her pulse flickering faster across the monitor, yet she continued. M-E-D-I-C-A-L-A-U-T-H-O-R-I-T-Y. Morgan read the completed request, then faced Adrian. Claire is revoking you as her medical decision-maker. Until her independent directive is completed, all decisions will remain with her through the communication system and her clinical advocate. Adrian's mouth opened. No argumente merced. A nurse removed the visitor badge clipped to his jacket and placed it on the counter with a faint plastic click. Morgan escorted him into the corridor, where the air felt colder and the fluorescent lights flattened every polished surface. The glass door sealed between husband and wife. From outside, Adrian watched Morgan angle the screen toward Claire and reserve the room's decisions for her alone. Then the privacy shade descended, cutting her face from view inch by inch. The divorce had been Adrian's demand. The boundary was Claire's, and for the first time, he could do nothing but wait outside it. Cold rain threaded silver lines down the hospital's parking garage windows, blurring the city into a field of white headlights and red brake lamps. Adrian sat behind the wheel without starting the engine, Claire's last sentence burning across the memory of the communication screen. "Give me the papers." His phone vibrated against the leather console. The chairman's name appeared, followed by a message. Emergency board meeting. Come alone. 40 minutes later, Adrian entered the executive conference room, where recessed lights gleamed across black walnut and brushed steel. The air smelled of espresso and expensive cologne. 12 directors waited beneath a wall, displaying the company logo, the empire he had once mistaken for proof that every sacrifice had been justified. A legal folder rested at his usual seat. Signed the separation statement, the chairman said. We announce that Claire acted independently, emotionally, and without authorization. Her accident becomes a private family tragedy, not a corporate matter. Adrian opened the folder. The language had already been polished for him. It described Claire as medically compromised before the crash and dismissed her safety data as unreliable. Another page authorized an accelerated divorce announcement to establish that she had no access to company decisions. You knew about the defect, Adrian said. No one answered. The ventilation system whispered overhead. Then the general counsel pushed a tablet across the table. Internal test reports filled the screen, each warning stamped reviewed, deferred, or non-material. The dates stretched back months. Beneath them were copies of Claire's emails, the same messages Adrian had ignored, forwarded among directors with instructions to keep them away from him until the launch cleared regulatory review. We protected the company, the chairman replied, and we protected you. A devoted husband abandoning his disabled wife looks ugly. A CEO distancing himself from an unstable source looks prudent. Adrian's thumb stopped on one final message. Get the divorce filed before she communicates. His reflection hovered over the glass, pale and fractured by columns of numbers. They had used his ambition, but the signature beside Claire's bed had still been his. The contempt in that hospital room had still come from his mouth. If you cooperate, the chairman continued, your position survives. Your equity remains untouched. By morning, this disappears. Adrian removed his CEO access card and placed it over the prepared statement. The plastic struck the walnut with a small, clean sound. No, he said. Chairs shifted. Someone muttered his name as a warning, but Adrian was already connecting the tablet to the room's secure terminal. He downloaded the testing records, the concealed emails, and the board's communications into an encrypted file. The general counsel reached for the keyboard. Adrian pulled it away and sent the archive to federal investigators and the company's outside compliance monitor. Confirmation appeared in green. Delivered. Only then did he face the room. Claire tried to stop us from hurting patients, he said. You tried to erase her. I helped you by refusing to listen. His phone began ringing before he reached the elevator. The company's security system revoked his credentials. A market alert flashed across the lobby screen. Trading in the stock had been halted pending investigation. Messages arrived from public relations, investors, and reporters. One notification confirmed the board's unanimous vote. Adrian was terminated as CEO, effective immediately. Outside, rain struck the pavement hard enough to mist around his shoes. Adrian loosened the tie he had worn like armor and called Elias Morgan. "Tell Claire the evidence is with the investigators," he said. "Tell her I chose the truth." Morgan's reply came after a measured silence. "I'll tell her what you did. What it means is hers to decide." Across the street, the company's illuminated logo went dark. Then Adrian's phone lit again, not with forgiveness, but with a notice that investigators had frozen his shares and ordered him to appear for questioning at 8 the next morning. For the first time, the empire would continue without him, and the truth would not. By noon, the red numbers on the financial channel were sliding downward without pause, accompanied by the dry chime of market alerts and the low murmur of commentators speaking from a wall-mounted television. Adrian stood in the lobby of his former company beneath white marble that reflected the winter light like ice. Employees who had once crossed the room to shake his hand now studied their phones. One former friend stepped into an elevator and pressed the close button before Adrian reached it. Another sent 6 words: "Don't contact me until this ends." The company's stock had lost more than half its value by closing bell. With his shares frozen and his salary gone, Adrian returned to the penthouse, carrying a cardboard box that smelled of paper, dust, and cold rain. The rooms were silent. City lights glittered beyond the glass walls. Italian leather chairs, polished walnut cabinets, and a black marble island stood exactly where Claire had chosen them. Her blue ceramic mug remained behind the espresso machine. Adrian touched its chipped rim, then pulled his hand away. A real estate broker arrived at 7. "A for sale will invite low offers," she warned, setting a contract on the marble. "And if the investigation expands, you may need this property for legal fees." Adrian looked toward the window, where his reflection hovered over the city he had once mistaken for proof that he mattered. "List it tomorrow," he said. "No private bidding. Fastest clean offer." 10 days later, the penthouse sold. Adrian kept enough to rent a 1-bedroom apartment and cover basic legal expenses. The rest went into an independently administered compensation fund for patients harmed by the defective monitors. The fund documents prohibited him from controlling distributions, attaching his name to publicity, or reclaiming the money if charges were filed. One provision reserved a substantial amount for Claire's treatment and rehabilitation. Dr. Elias Morgan carried that provision into her room on a gray afternoon. Warm sunlight lay across the blanket, and the communications screen hummed beside her bed. Adrian waited beyond the glass, close enough to see Claire's eyes move, too far away to hear the synthesized voice she now controlled with deliberate focus. Morgan read the offer once. Claire selected her response letter by letter. "No." Morgan leaned closer. The money could provide years of specialized therapy. Her gaze returned to the screen. The cursor blinked. Then the machine spoke in its calm, neutral voice. "Patients first. Remove my allocation." Adrian's fingers tightened around the paper cup in his hand until coffee seeped through the lid and burned his skin. Claire continued, "My recovery is mine." Each word arrived slowly, but none wavered. "I will apply for grants. I will work when I can. I will not be purchased by his guilt." Morgan printed the revised instruction and brought it into the corridor. The paper was still warm from the machine when Adrian took it. "Did she ask where the money came from?" "She knows you sold the penthouse." Morgan's voice stayed level. "She also knows sacrifice does not create a debt she must repay with forgiveness." Through the glass, Claire turned her eyes toward Adrian. The ventilator whispered. A therapy aide adjusted the support beneath her wrist, and Claire forced one finger upward against gravity, held it trembling for 2 seconds, then lowered it under her own control. Adrian placed the revised document against the wall and signed away Claire's reserved share. No argument, no condition. Morgan returned the signed page to her. Claire read it, then moved her gaze to the blank field on her communication screen. A new sentence formed. Now tell him I want a complete accounting of what he built with my work. The printer clicked, feeding out the page between them. The printer's rollers gave one dry click, and the demand for an accounting slid into Dr. Elias Morgan's hand. Cold evening light sharpened the edges of the hospital glass. Beneath the antiseptic odor lingered the warm, dusty scent of paper pulled from long storage. Morgan placed a sealed archive box on Claire's rolling table, then angled her communication screen so she could see every document. Adrian remained beyond the threshold until Claire selected 3 words with her eyes. Let him enter. His footsteps stopped beside the bed. Morgan opened the box and removed engineering notebooks, patent drafts, and a faded agreement bearing 2 signatures. Blue ink covered the notebook pages in Claire's compact handwriting. Equations curved around hand-drawn cardiac rhythms. Corrections crowded the margins where she had refined the algorithm that separated dangerous arrhythmias from harmless irregularities. Adrian reached toward the first notebook, then drew his hand back before touching it. These are the original development records, Morgan said. The independent accounting authenticated every page. He laid the first patent draft beside them. Claire's name appeared under inventor. On the file version, Adrian's name occupied the same line. The ventilator released a measured breath. Adrian stared at the altered page until the fluorescent light turned its white surface almost silver. I thought the core model came from the research team. Claire's gaze moved across the screen. The cursor traveled slowly, letter by letter. It came from me. Morgan opened the faded agreement. Years earlier, Adrian's first company had stood days from bankruptcy. Creditors would not extend financing to an unknown engineer with unfinished patents, but they would back a marketable founder who controlled the intellectual property outright. Claire had assigned Adrian temporary ownership, allowing him to present her algorithm as his asset. The capital arrived. Payroll cleared. The company survived. Then each funding round buried her authorship beneath another contract, another press release, another photograph of Adrian standing alone beneath stage lights. She intended to restore the patents after the company stabilized, Morgan said. Instead, she kept postponing it because challenging the filings could have collapsed the business and exposed you to fraud claims. Adrian lifted the assignment. The paper trembled between his fingers. Claire's signature was steady at the bottom. Beside it, in handwriting he recognized from notes once left beside his morning coffee, she had written, "Protect Adrian until the bridge financing closes." "You gave me everything," he whispered. Claire blinked toward the screen. "No, I loaned you my work." The distinction landed without heat, cleaner than accusation. Morgan set down the final audit report. Its ownership map traced the company's patents, licensing revenue, and valuation back to Claire's original code. The empire Adrian had displayed in glass offices and magazine covers had not merely benefited from her sacrifice. It had been built upon it. His wedding ring touched the metal bed rail with a small, hollow sound as he lowered the report. Claire selected another sentence. "I want my name restored." Adrian looked through the transparent wall at the darkened city beyond the hospital, then back at the woman whose silence he had mistaken for absence. Morgan turned the audit toward him and tapped the signature line authorizing its release. "Restoring her ownership will expose every filing that credited you," he said. "Once this leaves the hospital, it cannot be contained." Claire held Adrian's gaze. The screen chimed again. Not privately. On the record. Morgan placed a pen beside the audit, but Claire moved her eyes to one final command. "Bring it to the hearing." The balance of power shifted with 4 quiet words. Adrian had lost the company, the penthouse, and the protection of his name. Now Claire was asking whether he would surrender the story that had made him. Cold white light washed across the hearing chamber, flashing on brass nameplates and the polished rims of water glasses. Camera shutters snapped behind the public rail while the ventilation system breathed dry, overcooled air through the room. Adrian sat beneath the seal of the Federal Oversight Panel with Claire's audit open before him. Across the aisle, Claire watched from a medical chair, her eye-controlled screen mounted beside her. Dr. Elias Morgan stood near enough to adjust the device, but his hands remained folded. The authority was hers. Adrian's attorney slid a settlement agreement across the oak table. Its paper felt thick and expensive beneath Adrian's fingers. "Sign this," the attorney whispered. "You return the intellectual property, acknowledge inaccurate filings, and cooperate with the investigation. In exchange, prosecutors recommend immunity from criminal charges." A second document lay beneath it, a carefully worded statement blaming the board's concealment without admitting Adrian had benefited from Claire's erased authorship. The hearing chair called his name. Adrian rose. The murmur behind him thinned into silence. Under oath, he described the suppressed safety reports, the defective device, and the pressure used to separate him publicly from Claire. Then he reached the question the settlement had been designed to avoid. "The company's core cardiac monitoring algorithm was not mine," he said. "A camera motor uirid." Claire's gaze did not leave him. "Claire created it. She placed it in my name when my business was failing, and I allowed the world to believe her work was proof of my genius." His attorney gripped his sleeve. "Adrian, stop." Adrian pulled free, set the unsigned immunity agreement beneath the microphone, and pushed it toward the panel. "I decline these terms." The room erupted in low, startled voices. The hearing chair lifted her gavel, but Adrian continued before it struck. He signed the authenticated assignment, transferring every patent claim, royalty right, and controlling interest connected to Claire's algorithm back to her. The pen scratched loudly in the sudden quiet. This signature did not discard a helpless wife. It dismantled the lie that had made him powerful. His attorney stood so sharply that the chair legs scraped the marble floor. "Do you understand that without this agreement, you may be prosecuted?" "Yes. You could lose your freedom." Adrian placed the pen beside Claire's audit. "Yes." The attorney glanced toward Claire, then lowered his voice, though every microphone caught it. "Are you doing this to win her back?" Adrian looked across the aisle. Claire's screen reflected a pale square of light against her cheek. Her face offered him no absolution, no invitation, no promise. "No," he said. "I'm doing it because she has paid enough for my mistakes." Morgan entered the executed transfer into the official record. A green confirmation light appeared on Claire's screen, and the clerk read her name aloud as inventor and owner. Claire blinked once to authorize publication. The corrected filings went public before Adrian returned to his seat. Phones vibrated throughout the gallery. Reporters surged toward the doors. Adrian's attorney closed the abandoned settlement and stepped away, leaving him alone at the table as federal counsel requested immediate review for criminal referral. The hearing chair raised her gavel again. "Mr. Adrian, remain in the chamber." The strike cracked through the cold room. Claire's name had been restored. Now the doors closed, and Adrian had no protection left between the truth and its sentence. The soft mechanical pulse of a hospital monitor reached the hearing chamber through Claire's live audio feed. Steady, patient, impossible to ignore. On the wall display, afternoon light lay pale across her sheets while the eye-controlled screen hovered beside her face. Adrian remained beneath the recessed lights, wrists unbound but hands resting openly on the oak table as federal counsel approached. Then Dr. Elias Morgan leaned toward Claire's display. "There's one final instruction you asked me to deliver." Blue letters appeared beneath the image of her eyes, each word selected with deliberate precision. "Bring Adrian to the hospital before custody." A murmur moved through the gallery. Adrian's attorney looked up, but Adrian said nothing. 20 minutes later, 2 federal officers escorted him through the rehabilitation wing, where the air smelled of antiseptic and rain drifting through a cracked window. His tailored jacket had been taken for processing. The thin white shirt beneath it clung between his shoulders. Morgan met them outside Claire's room and stopped him at the glass door that had once made Adrian the outsider. "When I told you she heard every word," the doctor said quietly, "I wasn't asking you to feel guilty. I was telling you she still had a voice." Morgan opened the door. The officers remained outside. Claire lay beneath a charcoal gray blanket, her gaze clear in the amber glow of a bedside lamp. No divorce papers waited between them now. Only the communication screen and a black fountain pen Adrian had once used to sign company contracts. Letters began forming. Seat. Adrian pulled the vinyl chair closer, but left several feet between them. The monitor breathed into the silence. Claire wrote again. You said you could not bury your future in this room. His fingers closed around his knees. I remember. Her gaze moved across the letter grid. Neither could I. The word stayed on the screen until Morgan quietly turned away. Claire instructed him to open a rehabilitation authorization bearing her restored legal name. It established a research program under her ownership, funded by future royalties from the algorithm, for patients with severe communication impairments. Adrian would have no position, no voting rights, and no claim to the work. Yet one blank remained beneath the witness line. Claire selected his name. Adrian stared at it. This was not forgiveness. It was something harder, permission to serve one honest purpose without possessing it. He lifted the pen, then paused. If signing harms your independence, her eyes cut toward the screen. My independence chose this. Adrian signed. The scratch of a nib sounded louder than the monitors. Morgan notarized the document and gave the officers a certified copy. Claire had transformed the instrument once used to erase her from his life into proof that her future belonged entirely to her. Then the screen chimed again. The divorce remains final. Adrian nodded once. It should. Your admission remains public. It will. And if the court sends you away? His breath clouded the cold edge of the window. Then I go without asking you to wait. For several seconds, only rain tapped the sill. Claire's right index finger moved against the sheet, barely half an inch, but unmistakably under her control. Morgan stepped closer, the silver head of his stethoscope catching the lamplight. Claire, he whispered, do it again. Her finger lifted, trembled, and pressed down. The first voluntary movement since the accident. Adrian rose instinctively, then stopped himself before crossing the space between them. Claire noticed. Her eyes returned to the board. You may come closer. He approached the bedside and offered his hand without touching her. After a long effort, her fingers settled against his palm. Not a reunion, not a promise. A choice made by the woman he had once mistaken for helpless. When the officers entered, Adrian did not pull away first. Claire did. The divorce had ended their marriage. The truth had stripped him of his empire, and the doctor's words had finally changed more than Adrian's mind. They had taught him that love without respect was only another form of ownership. At the doorway, he looked back. Claire's restored name glowed across the research charter while her finger moved toward the next letter, already building a life no one else would be allowed to sign away. He had filed to abandon a woman he believed could not answer. In the end, her answer taught him how to leave with dignity and let her rise without him.